And good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to Informal Conversations. I'm your host, Leon Johnson. And today we have Stanley Johnson and Fahed Ahmed. Good morning.
Morning,
First, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for volunteering for this discussion today. And let's jump right into it, shall we? So, the first thing I would like to talk about is reparations. With all the things that are going on right now after the George Floyd incident, um, there's been a lot of talk about Black people fighting for the same things they've been fighting for the last 400 years. Equality and being able to be treated as equals. Um, you know, Police brutality has always been high in our community for some reason, even something as simple as a simple traffic stop. And reparations has been a big topic of late. And just like to get your this initial uh, thinking in regards to, do you think that people that are descendants of slaves have the rights to reparations? Stanley, you want to take a stab at that?
yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the first podcast. Um, uh, I believe they do. History's shown when there's been a marginalized group that has been affected by some kind of by the government. For instance, when the Japanese were put in internment camps, I think it was World War II. I believe they almost 80,000 Japanese Americans received $20,000 apiece in reparations, and they were in internment camp. I think about 2.5 years or 3 years, somewhere around that. So when it comes down to slavery and the descendants of those, I do believe that reparations would assist the communities that have been oppressed over since the beginning of time in the United States. After dealing with slavery, after dealing with the Jim Crow era, war on drugs, a lot of this institutional racism and a lot of the oppression that has gone on in America has plagued the inner city and the Black communities. And I believe in order for us to provide the resources and to help uh, those communities overcome the oppression that they've faced, I think reparations, what I mean by reparations, I mean by helping or be intentional about putting money back into these communities in order to help overcome some of the financial, not only financial, but just the difficulties that have been affected by slavery and other oppressive and institutional racism in this country.
Just real quick before I get to Fahad, what is your take on actual cash payments to descendants of slaves?
I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to that either. You know, once again, I don't have a plan in place as far as, hey, look, we need to give, you know, certain amount. I just think that, the conversation should be had, and we need to get people together to try to figure out a way to give reparations to those who were affected or whose descendants come from slavery. I know my grandfather on my father's side, Aaron Amos Johnson, he was a slave in Virginia. He was born in 1848, and he was a slave, and he was born in slavery with his father, and so forth and so on. So um, I do believe, it's kind of like, and a lot of people look at it like, I don't think they should get handouts, or I don't want any handouts. I don't really think it's a handout. I think it's a debt that's owed. Just, what I'm saying, a debt that's owed. Whenever you have free labor and you torture individuals for multiple years, I think some kind of restitution should be given, to right those wrongs.
And it's interesting you're talking about, in today's world, people say we don't want to give out handouts and we want people to pull themselves up from bootstraps. But those same people must not actually study history, because we can go back in the history books and identify a lot of times where people from other demographics
Yeah.
were given handouts from the government. So, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get and I can expound on that a little bit. I mean, a little bit more later. You know what I'm saying? But that just touching on the subject. That's my thought process
Okay.
with respect to reparations.
Okay. And Fahed, what do you think, man? Do people descendants of slavery deserve reparations from the U.S. government?
I do agree with that. A couple of notes I took from what he was saying is, maybe instead of payouts, I mean, still get payouts, but different programs in place, right? I mean, it's 2020 now, so I feel like maybe a handout won't have the same effect. I kind of look at it as they're giving out these stimulus, right? Or at least we only got one wave of stimulus. How many people actually used it to better themselves or better their families? Or there's so many case by case scenarios, kind of like how they used it off of last year's taxes or the years prior. There's not really a set way or a set standard of justifying who gets what, right? And I don't think you can actually put a number amount on something like this, right? You can't say, hey, based on that torture or that time frame or that many years, you can say, hey, this amount of money is gonna make it right, or even justify anything, right? Because you didn't really help at that time. You're helping now. Maybe some programs to help better the communities, to pump in money in different cities that really, really need it, that help guide the new generation, right? I think the whole point is to correct the new generation coming in, to kind of create a new type of, point in history that changes things. Better education, maybe more scholarships, different funds where you kind of earn it, but it's also given. If that kind of makes sense, where I'm getting with that.
Okay. I actually did a little research on this, and there was a gentleman, an economist. I can't remember his name. I don't want to jack the recording up to bring a window over, but he actually did a study and said that the financial impact in today's dollars would be somewhere between 1.7 and $14 trillion, $4 trillion. I have to go back and look it up. But there's actually somebody who actually did the research, and it's in the trillions of dollars in terms of, because you got to understand that the people back in the day, you're talking about slavery started back in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia. And over the course of from 1619 until when slavery was abolished in the North from 1774 to 1804, and then was finally abolished in 1865 with the 13th Amendment. I mean, that's what, over 200 years of slavery, enslavement of over 3 to 4 million people. And then if you fast forward that to the Jim Crow laws and the redlining, and then just the systematic oppression, I mean, there's a significant financial impact to the Black community. And based on what this guy said, is that it's in the trillions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And he said that you could actually make a case for there being a per person payout financially in terms of cash. And it would be easily done because, like, Fahed said, we do pay taxes every year. Everybody does pretty much. So, and I mean, everybody has you fill out a document that says you're either white, you're of Hispanic or non-Hispanic, you're African American, you're Asian. So we know how people identify, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that what I'm trying to get across is, I think some people have done the financial impact in terms of how it has affected Black people over the numerous years.
And it's
but what do we do about it is, I guess, the bigger question.
it's not a novel idea. Once again, like I said, with our Japanese American community, also with the Jewish community, I believe Germany came up with, I can't remember the name of the agreement, but I believe it was something like 847 million that they gave to descendants of that era. That in the form of reparations to assist that community in the crimes that were committed against them. I believe when you get up high enough to an individual, the people who can put something together to try to come up with a plan to give back to those who were affected by it, then I don't think it's something that's a novel idea. I think it's something that could be actually thought out and prepared.
And just think about it real quick before Fahed comments. When slavery was ended, slave owners were compensated for the slaves that they lost based on slavery being ended. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can also talk about the Native Americans. Like, there was reparations given to the Native Americans. Now, in my humble idea, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
They were killed, their land was stolen, the whole nine, right? But they were given reservations, and then they were also given these, at least here in Florida, they were given these casinos that they could run, and I think there's some tax incentives and stuff like that was given to the Native Americans, Native Americans. Let me clean that up. So they were given reparations as well, and like you said, the Germans paid their restitution for what they did. Seems like the only group of people that haven't been rightly compensated for the atrocities that have happened are people of African descent. So Stanley, let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So if looking at your crystal ball, I know you got one over there. Successful businessman that you are. I know you got a crystal ball and you kind of rub it and come up with these genius ideas and stuff. If you was to rub your crystal ball over there and actually really thought about it, what makes sense in today's world? I'm not going to give my 2 cents because then I just want to get your idea. What makes sense to you in terms of reparations for descendants of African slaves?
Well, I mean, I think I pretty much touched on it. Like I don't have enough information to kind of like put a dollar amount on it. I think my main concern would to be reinvest in our communities, and once again, that deals with just the effects of slavery and the effects of the systematic oppression that we've endured that help maintain us in in an inferior position, so to speak, throughout the country. I mean, with the with the inability to create wealth through getting loans from the banks, not having enough resources for our schooling, not having enough resources to help provide, just to have different programs and stuff in our communities that will give us additional resources so we can begin to progress as a community. I was talking to my wife the other day. It's like, okay, it's like if you're playing Monopoly, and I start off in jail, but yet you got the other, say, 4 players. They go around. I can't get out of jail until they go around at least 10 to 15 times. By the time I'm out of jail, I still only get to roll once every 3 turns. And when I get out, they own all the property. How can I build wealth? So as I'm going around the board, I'm still paying out. How do you make that game fair? Hey, well, you're playing now. What are you complaining about? Yeah, but I'm already behind the ball. How would you even the playing field unless you were to give up some property, unless you were to invest more wealth in that individual? You know what I'm saying? And then some people say, okay, well, we'll give you the little purple one on the corner. You pass go. We're not gonna give you two. We give you one. You know what I'm saying?
That's a very good analogy.
Yeah.
That's my mentality. That's where I am. Why I believe reparations should be given to the African American community in the United States.
Okay. I just want to let me clean something up that I said earlier before we get to Fahed. It says right here that experts estimate that the total amount and this is the total amount of experts have widely range of estimates for the exact amount owed to the descendants of slaves. Thomas Kramer from the University of Connecticut, for example, placed the total amount at 5.9 to 14.2 trillion in 2009 dollars, while Jack Hickle argued that unpaid slave labor from 1619 to 1865 equaled up to 97 trillion total.
And I'm gonna add something real quick. That is one of the main reasons why the United States became such a power so quickly. You know, they built this country off of unpaid labor.
Yep.
You know, and what do? I mean, none of us will go work for somebody for free for years. We want to be compensated. So when you have that much labor, free labor, I think that there's a debt to society that's owed to the African American community. You know, now how we pay that debt, it's not like we didn't think we had any money until Corona hit. Now they're coming up with trillions of dollars to fund into the actual community.
All right, let's give Fahed in here and get his 2 cents.
All right, go ahead.
You know, hey, listen, he's got the video turned off, so sometimes we forget he's here. I just see this little name.
You don't want to see my kids. They're peaceful. I completely agree with Stan. I mean, he nailed it. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of that analogy with the monopoly, but that makes perfect sense. You know, when you have such a setback, I don't think it'll ever catch up. It just can't. There's no way. So now that, you know, Stan hearing you out, it definitely makes me think. You know, even the 97 trillion, let's just say on the high side, would that really, you know, over the course of years, yes, it'll help. But again, like he was saying, if you pump it into communities, if you do programs, I think it's a long way ahead, but there should be something in place. And after, you know, getting a little bit of history education, now that you brought up everything, there's absolutely no reason why there shouldn't be. You know, absolutely not. I mean, we share this with our kids in school. We teach history. You know, I'm surprised it hasn't been brought up more times than now, right? But I guess whatever's going on around the world now is really bringing it to light. You know, and I think it should happen now. And you're right; they are pumping trillions of dollars, right? I mean, I'm in the military now, and you know, we usually have a funding cap, right, every year. Well, clearly we don't have a funding cap. All of a sudden, it's whatever we need, whatever we want, we get right now. So why is it that we can't bring that to light and fix that as well? You can't even say fix, right? Let's just say set up a program to try to make it better for everybody. Let's try to make it better for the communities. Let's try to make the wrong right in one sense. Because I don't think everybody will agree with this, I'm sure, right? This is the point of this. And I think if we have some other people on here that have the other take of not agreeing with it, I'd love to know why.
Okay, I was just about to bring that up. So we have a even balance. A couple guys, for one reason or another, couldn't show up this morning. So I'll try to be them today, even though, you know, I'm not. Just as a follow up to something Fahed said, Congressman John Conyers brought up HR 40, and since 1989 up until 2017, when he finally resigned from Congress, he actually tried to bring a bill to the floor that said that can we take a look at if reparations is possible. That resolution was never passed on the floor of the House. So, and this wasn't even a bill that says we should pay it. It was a bill that says, can we investigate if it's possible, should we, and if we should, how? And even that resolution to take a look into reparations was never passed. So it kind of shows you the uphill climb it would take for something like this to even be considered possible. So saying that, let's talk about the other side. So I'll play the other side for now. This morning, you will hear people say that there are a number of individuals, non-white people. We'll go that route. So that encompasses immigrants to this country, um, uh, African Americans, just people who are non-white, people of Hispanic descent, Asian Americans, the whole gambit, right? That have come to this country with nothing, and based on hard work and dedication, have been successful despite obstacles that have been put in their way. Um, what do you say to people with that mindset that says, well, either my parents or my grandparents or my great grandparents came here with nothing and didn't get a handout from the government and were successful, raised successful children, put them through college, worked 4 or 5 jobs to put them through college. And despite, the barriers that they've encountered, made it and are experiencing the American dream, I guess you would say. What do you would say to people that have that type of mindset or thought process?
You want Fahed to go first? Or you want me to go?
Yeah,
first?
yeah. If I want you to jump on
Stan
that one
first, because
first.
he nails it every single time. I mean, he makes me really.
No.
I don't
Letting you off the hook here, bro.
Hey, I don't mind. I just didn't want to feel like I'm always going first, you know what I'm saying? But I don't mind. Unless Leon, you want Fahed to go first, but I don't mind.
I actually would like to take Fahed first this time. Just Fahed, remember, there's no right or wrong answer, brother.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, you're talking about different cultures, different, people from different backgrounds, and people saying, oh, do they, deserve kind of a handout? I don't think those are the right terms to be used, right? I don't really say it's a handout. I think a stimulus is not a handout. I think the right time being spent the right way is not a handout. I think if this was to actually work and to go in place, and let's just use the 97 trillion as a benchmark, right? Not saying it's an accurate number or that's actually going to happen. I would never say it's a handout. I think if somebody was educated enough, right? Let's just say if they even listen to this podcast and they dug into history and got the facts straight, I think everybody would understand. But I think until they know the facts, until everybody's educated on history, nobody will understand. And if you look at, everything going on around the world and the riots and everything else, and you actually see some people that go and question some of them and ask them, why are you here? What are you doing? They really don't know why they're there. They're just there because so-and-so told them. But the people that are educated enough to know why they're standing up for themselves or standing up for the community, standing up for what's right, it's slim to none, in my opinion. My unit got sent out down to Richmond. They filed state of emergency because of the riots down in Richmond. And 9 times out of 10, if you ask a soldier, hey, what were they really mad about? What were they really, getting angry about? And you would ask them, and they didn't know the question. They were just yelling. They were just doing everything else. So I feel like if everyone doesn't know the history, if everyone doesn't know the facts, I think it could have really bad impact. I think because I'm Middle Eastern, as you know. Sorry, I don't have a camera on, but if I feel like, hey,
I know.
If an African American person or community got X amount of dollars because of slavery, would I feel like, hey, I go through a lot, right? I still feel like any, you could say Middle Eastern people or Hispanic people are cheaper labor. It's not free, but you could say, hey, I think you could find cheaper labor. They call them day laborers, I guess, right? And you could just hire them. And then the Americans or, a white person might be like, hey, they're taking our jobs. I think it's a full vicious circle. And everybody will always say it's unfair or it's a handout. So I think it has to be something where somebody could justify what's fair. And I think it's all about history. I think it's being educated and knowing what's right and wrong.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. And okay.
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay. And just to follow, I agree. And my question would be, to the individuals who felt the way you just said, Leon, was have they been enslaved? Were their ancestors enslaved in America for over 300 something odd years? You know, I mean, we understand the struggle. African Americans go through the struggle every day. Yes, I'm not, and you know, we overcome hurdles, we overcome obstacles. You know, we're faced with different things, and we still push through. I'm not saying that to stop, you know, living. I'm not saying to stop progressing. You know, like with respect to I got four kids, two African American male boys, and I don't give them reasons or excuses of why they can't succeed. You know, I continue to push them to let them know you can still overcome all hurdles. As a father, I try to remove those hurdles. You know, I try to remove those obstacles. So I'm not sitting here asking for a handout. We're still going to push forward, whether we get reparations or not. We're still going to continue to overcome these obstacles. We're still going to continue to progress as a community. You know, but if we can receive the debt that's owed to our ancestors, and we can help remove some of these obstacles that we face today, why wouldn't we? You know, I've heard people say, hey, you know, I heard Caucasian people say, hey, you know, I grew up poor. I grew up, you know, in the hood. I grew up with nothing. Exactly. Now imagine doing that while you're Black. You know, because we face so many other obstacles in America, you know, that other groups may not, you know, may not encounter. And my job and my position is to try to remove those obstacles and remove those barriers so we can live or have the American dream on the same level. Or, you know, I'm not even gonna say as white people, but just as humans. You know what I'm saying? We want the same human rights that we're entitled to. You know, and that's all we're asking. So if I'm asking for reparations, I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking a debt that I believe that's owed to my ancestors, as well as an opportunity to receive funding to remove some of these obstacles that are placed in front of us just because of our, you know, of our skin color or our heritage. You know, that's my point. And once again, it's just mine. I'm not
And I agree
particularly
with that. It's an unpaid debt. That's a better term. It's not a handout. It's an unpaid debt.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think if again I'm gonna take the other side so we can get some balance to the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try my best. And what I'm doing is I'm taking conversations I've had with other people so I can kind of represent the other side, because I don't really understand how the other side feels other than what's been told to me. So I'm just going to try to regurgitate as best I can. What about the other side who says that, you know, the reason why some African Americans don't succeed despite the barriers is because of their mentality? They'd rather make excuses because of slavery or because of other impediments for a reason why they haven't succeeded in life. What do you think about that? I mean,
All right.
do you get where I'm coming from?
I know where you're coming from.
Okay.
I know where you're coming from. There's a lot of people that say that we're lazy, that, you know, we're sitting here and looking for handouts, that we, you know, we just don't have, you know, and it's a falsehood, because there are a lot of African Americans that are very successful, that work very hard, that are, you know, that have the motivation, intelligence, and everything to succeed and have succeeded. You know, you go to anybody's community, you're gonna find people that don't want to work. You're gonna find people that's trying to live off of their mommy daddy's heritage, live off of the community, live off, you know what I'm saying, without actually putting in effort to succeed. That's any community, you know. However, if you look at, and I think we touched on this in the previous, you know, you got to take everything into consideration. You know, when you look at the mental anguish or the mental health crisis that derived from slavery, from Jim Crow. I mean, it was intentionally taught and intentionally um, placed on the black and on African American community how we were less intelligent. We were animals. We're demonized. We're, you know what I'm saying? And this comes from, I mean, theories like the Willie Lynch theories and that type of mentality, how you were going to break and beat down a slave, kill the mind, keep the body, you know, that type of mentality. You know, so when you deal with stuff that has been plagued or has been, you know, saying injected into your psyche for years, you're going to deal with some mental health issues that derive from that, that's passed on from generation to generation. And even with that place within our community, we still thrive. You know what I'm saying? We still have individuals that, I mean, we still find a way to continue to succeed and continue to move forward. Yes, we have a problem in our in a lot of our marginalized or inner city or urban areas, or you know what I'm saying, but that's with anybody, anywhere you go. You know, it's just the spotlight a lot of times is on our community. You know, we don't spotlight other areas. We don't spotlight other you know, think black on black crime. Why is there black on black crime? I don't hear anything about white on white crime or yeah, well, I guess Asian on Asian crime. I don't want to, you know, say the wrong thing, but you know, there's always a spotlight on black crime. You know, when it's just crime within those communities, and in order to solve that crime within those communities, you need resources, and we need to stop treating those communities like, you know, you don't fund millions of dollars in the police force and no money in the education system. You know, I've been in inner cities where I go to the schools that's in the inner city, and they don't have the resources. You know, they don't have the programs. You know, they don't have the things to help, you know, these children grow. You know, but you go outside of those communities and into the suburbs, you know, the police aren't having, well, you know, they have a lot of resources to put into those school systems, you know, to help, you know, to keep the progression and to help to keep the focus on education and a lot of things that help that community progress.
Okay. And what about you, Fahad? What do you say to an individual who says that, you know, like I said before, that, you know, black people are lazy or they're just looking for handouts?
I think I
It's the mentality that keeps them down. What's your counter
I
argument
think it's
to a
just
person with that type of thought
I think
process?
it's just like anybody else who just want to what they want to show on the news, what they want to pinpoint, what they see, right? Like you're walking down the street, you might see an African American person just sitting there, right? And you'd be like, man, that person's lazy. But you might see a white American person on the side of the street and be like, oh, he's just hanging out, you know? He's on his off day. it's just it's it's just the mentality that people
Mhm.
have, and they assume this because that's what they're taught. You know, I was just thinking about something while Stan was talking. You know, like I live in a pretty high end community here, right? And I'm Middle Eastern, and a lot of times I see in this community that a lot of like Southern Indian, Middle Eastern people are moving in, and they're like taking over the neighborhood. That's what those are their words, right? Hey, they're taking over the neighborhood. And when they move in, they put on this type of it's like a streamer type of thing, right? They're supposed to do every for the first 2 weeks of moving into a new house. Well, the HOA says we have too many complaints, and you can no longer do that, even that's your religious view, right? They said no, you got to take them down, you know. And a lot of the community on the Facebook are like, hey, they're just taking over everywhere you look. They're just taking over. But it makes me think because what are they taking over from? 9 times out of 10, they're IT, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be like, you know, they're just IT guys, right? They came on an H1 visa, right? So they got them at peanuts. They stuffed them 15, 20 deep in a house. And I see it all the time, right? Somebody will invest like a data center or something. They'll put them 15, 20 in a house that they rent. They'll pay them peanuts and they do their time, as they call it. And then they get released, right? They get, you know, a work permit. They use this system not to get free labor, but it's pretty much free labor, right? But the only thing is they finally get out. Now, if you look at history, they just didn't get paid. I mean, it was almost like unpaid labor. You just would never be able to progress. Now, in this system, they're advancing, right? That's why a lot of things are going to India. You can see a lot of markets here are trying to go overseas where it's cheaper because they can't find it cheaper here. So I think it's just a fear. I think it's a fear for maybe a white American or another race to say, hey, will they be more superior? Right? When you're hungry, when you're poor, you're more likely to succeed. That's how I look at it. We were poor when I was little. My mom worked at 7-Eleven, which is like the typical, hey, she worked at 7-Eleven, the daycare, and they did cleaning houses or whatever you could do, but it was always at peanuts. But you still had a path. You weren't as limited. You weren't just not getting paid. So I feel like if you were to pump 97 trillion or even 50 trillion into communities, they wouldn't have a limit. And I think it's just the fear. I think they bring up in the news that, hey, a black on black crime versus you never see a Middle Eastern doing something to another Middle Eastern. I don't think in the last 20 years I've ever seen that on CNN. I don't think so. They just call it a terrorist activity, right? So, I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm the point blank. It's just called a terrorist activity. So I feel like I get impacted all the time just being in the military. I wear a uniform. I'm the only Middle Eastern person in the state of Virginia. In the entire state of Virginia National Guard, I am one. So
I didn't know that, bro.
So I think, and over here, it's not as bad, right? I talk the same. I like the same stuff. I think it's a more of an initial, hey, what's it like? But I still feel it. I'm still in E5. I can't progress. A lot of times they don't want me to progress. They don't want me to be an officer. They don't want me to be an E6 or keep going up. I've been an E5 for 7 years. I'm doing an officer's job. I'm an exercise coordinator. I travel all around the U.S. I meet with all sorts of rank, full bird colonels. But it's funny that the question they have for me is, why are you so low ranked and you're coming to these meetings? Why? Because I'm worth peanuts to them, right? They can have 30 of me before they pay an officer. And you'll see a couple officers that you're just like, man, all the peanuts aren't in him, right? He's not educated, but how did he do it? So I think no matter what you do or what you say, I think they just don't want a certain race to come in and be more superior. I think if you gave somebody the right tools, they can always be superior, right? It kind of like he was saying, he's got 4 kids. If he has structure in the house, a good education, of course, they're getting all the right tools. I think for other families that are unfortunate enough to have, maybe discipline or maybe the finances or the opportunities in that city, right? For example, depending on the geographic location, you very well might never make it because in that city or that town, you just won't make it. And you already accept that. A lot of times I think people accept, they come to terms with it. And that's their mental state, is they come to terms that I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to be rich. I'm just going to live my life to the fullest of where I'm at now. But I think if you have programs in communities, you have certain structures, people will be more hungry to succeed, right? They'll find more motivational speakers, right? Like if they saw you, they'd be like, hey, I want to be like Leon Johnson. I say it to you all the time. I say, hey, I want to be like you, right? You're making the right moves, the right investments, taking care of your kids, doing what's fundamentally right. And you're passing that on to the next generation. And I think that's what we need to focus on. It's not about us. It's the next generation, and that's what's going to make an impact. And I think as times are getting, I guess you can call them tough, right? You call them tough when people can't solve a vaccine, when people can't solve certain things, and it creates different types of fear. It's no longer a fear of, hey, what color is that person? It's a fear of, hey, do they have a virus, right? Because now it's equal terms. It's not about, hey, is it the African-American person not wearing the mask? Or is it the person that you keep seeing on YouTube, the white lady that just starts swinging a bat because she can't buy grocery because she doesn't want to believe in the mask? She's like, no, this is fake, right? It's no longer about racism. It's a different type of fear. And I think that kind of equals things out. And I think it's a good time to bring up, restitution and trying to make things right. I think as fear grows, even in my community, I have not seen anybody say anything about, hey, there's Middle Eastern people here, anything for at least 2 months. It's all died down. People are walking these sidewalks at 5 o'clock. They all come out because there's nothing to do. And there's no longer those weird looks like, who's that? Look, he's wearing some kind of a ninja outfit or something, right? Or whatever they want to call it. They don't care what you wear. They don't care how you dress. They don't care where you're from. They're just saying hello, making sure you got your mask on. The community's coming together. But I think it's time to change that. And now is the time to do it. This is the perfect time.
Cool. Awesome. This like not off topic, but kind of on topic. Do you see the separation today more about race, or is it more about rich and poor?
That's a good question. I think right now in this scenario of everything going on, I don't think anybody's caring if you're rich or poor. I think they're just trying to survive. I think at some stage when it's no longer about race, it's no longer about how much money you have. I think it's all about health. I think it's all about concerns of everybody's safety. And if it is about rich or poor, well, they need to get their priorities straight, right? I mean, for example, I was at Costco yesterday, and there was a lady all decked out, right? I mean, she must have been worth $1 million walking down that aisle, and she went to the same food court I did, right, where you could see a lot of people with different races, and I could see that, hey, they're trying to feed their kids, because I've never seen so many people want a $10 Costco pizza, but they can feed their whole family. And she was in that line, but then she took a step back and try to stay away from the line. But you could see that everybody just has to come together. It didn't matter if you're rich or poor. Everybody's trying to survive right now, and that's kind of where I'm getting with it. Is I don't think people look at that right now. We used to. I'd say 4 months ago, of course. I think if you go to a spa, or if you go somewhere there where everything was normal, right, you would say, hey, that's a rich family, or they got a lot, or somebody rolls in with a Range Rover versus a Toyota Corolla. I think that stigma was there, but right now I think it's changing. That's just my opinion. I think communities have to come together.
Okay. What you think, Stan?
If we're actually talking about today and the climate that we're in right now, I don't think the rich or poor aspect of it is as prevalent. I do think, just depending on what you're focusing on, I do think the racial climate is a little more on topic, or because of the George Floyd and because of the protests and stuff like that, we are starting to discuss, like I said before, that elephant in the room, something that hasn't been addressed. Before, you look back a few months, years back, a lot of people, which I agree to some degree, is that the separation in America was more about class and not about race. But I think, and that's what you see. You're trying to see a certain amount. You see, like I live in a fairly good, prominent neighborhood as well. But those racial aspects now are really starting to be addressed, because of what's going on in the world. But I agree, though, because of the pandemic, we're all kind of coming together, regardless of your class, because now, whether you're rich or poor, you need to wear your mask, or you need to protect yourself and stuff like that. So I do think, because of the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff, that race is starting to be addressed, like the tearing down of the monuments, and just different plans and programs that people are advocating for now, which should have been addressed years ago, people are actually starting to really consider, or even take action against certain things that has been in our community, or in our society for years, that were never addressed. So once again, I think that the rich or poor aspect of things, I don't think that's really on the forefront. I do believe that the racial issue is starting to get more attention, which it needs. But I also think that due to the pandemic, that is kind of bringing us together as a country, because it's something that we have to do together. Now, I'm gonna add this little tidbit in there. You will see you will see a distinguishing difference between rich and poor because the pandemic is affecting, I think the um, lower economic communities more so than, um, your affluent communities, due to resources, and their ability, like, we don't have to leave our home, but I can't say the same for somebody who may have 6 or 7 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. They don't have so they can go out and they have to go out and get food. They have to go out and do things which are exposing them more to the virus and not having and the underlying health conditions in the African American community, which is also something that's been highlighted due to the virus as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
As far as being what's more prevalent in today's community now.
Awesome. So let's pivot for a second because Stan, you touched on something earlier that I want to kind of get into when we're talking about reparations, and we'll get Fahed to start answer this one first. So when we start talking about reparations, the one thing we talked about was financial finances and money getting dispersed to different people. Defunding the police is kind of is another topic in terms of finances. We're talking about large sums of money to the police department that they receive every year through the city, county, state, and federal government, and through the George Floyd incident and the things that have been discussed over the last the last month or so since his death, defunding the police has been a really hot topic. Fahed, when you hear the term defunding the police, what does that mean to you?
I mean, to take away, but I don't believe in, I mean, that's kind of a catch-22, right? I wear a uniform, right? So when somebody says, hey, we're going to defund the police, I kind of feel like, hey, that's kind of like my brother in arms, right? For instance, my National Guard unit is next door to the state police department, right? They wear a uniform, I wear a uniform. We both walk outside that door. We look at each other as equals. What I do, what they do is a little different, of course, but we have that certain respect. Now, if somebody said, hey, we're going to defund the military because they're out there handling the riots and whatnot, or we're showing force, right, depending on what's going on, we have different thresholds than a police officer does until we show force. But it's still equal terms in that sense. I think maybe defunding the police for a certain period of time might help, might not help, but I think it's a deeper problem. I think with the police, it's more of who's allowing these people to be police officers. For example, I joined the military and I don't make it through. Like I don't stay in for more than, let's just say 2 years, 3 years, right? Something happens where I'm just like, I don't like this and my mental state is a little off or whatever, and I just leave. A soldier can actually go and join the police force and bypass a lot of their tests because you were already in the military. There's so many different ways to get inside the police force, and a lot of checks and balances aren't created because they just bypass it. I think there's so many generations of police officers that, one, don't get paid enough, right? When you go to New York City, and I go there all the time, or I used to for DHS, and the local police officer there in Times Square would say, yeah, we start off at 35, 40,000 a year. Now you tell me how you take a police officer that's protecting citizens at 35, 40,000 a year in Times Square in New York City, where you can't, 40,000 is like nothing. And you expect these police officers to not turn, to not start, getting aggressive, to not start trying to find ways to make more money, right? The mentality changes. And I think once you start bringing in those kind of people every year, every single year, new generation, and you never give them more money, you never give them what they feel is fair. They feel like this is a power, like a power position, right? And they use that power in the wrong way. And now it's coming to light that what is it that they actually do? And I think it's more of I think it's more of anger towards the structure, right? You don't hear a lot of military doing that because they try to pay fairly, right? Every year we get a raise. Every year there's different demographics. You get BAH allowance, you get housing allowance for where you're at, and it creates a balance. I don't think there's a balance in the police force at all. There's none. I mean, you come to Fairfax County right here down the street, which is one of the richest counties, and you make 45,000. You can't survive off that. You can't have a clear conscience 3 years in being a police officer and say, man, I'm going to make big money one day when I'm like 55, 60 years old. I'm going to finally hit $60,000 a year, right? Or I'm going to hit retirement and I'll get that pension. All right. Everybody goes for that pension, but you got to make it there. I think to answer your question, I don't think defunding the police is going to do anything. I think they just need to clear house. You got to go in and really see who is doing what. You know, like you said, I think the body cams, right? I think you brought that up a few months ago. They're investing in these body cams that kind of records everything a police officer does. I think these kind of things are going to help because you can actually see what happens. But at the same time, if somebody above you doesn't want somebody to see that video, it can stop right there. If you're, a prime police officer or a senior police officer, you can easily just say, hey, I don't know what happened. And I think that's always going to be the case. I think there's always this power control. Defunding the police, yeah, it's going to make a lot of, police officers angry, and the chief of police can be angry. And you see that now, right? They say, hey, that was one officer that did that. It's not us. How can you say it's not us? It's one team, one fight. Doesn't matter what uniform you wear. You're aware of that. You think that's the first time that happened? No. You think that's the first time, they've ever heard of it? No. They literally have a history on the person. They have a history on every person. So that tells you that the structure has different thresholds to say, hey, it's okay. So-and-so happened because so-and-so did this. It's never going to change until you change the structure, until you come in and you have different tests, different things that see if you are fit to be a police officer. And what does that mean? That means you have to pay them more, right? Kind of like some positions in IT, you have to have a top secret clearance. You have to have a lifestyle poly. There's different things. And even a janitor with a lifestyle poly makes 6 figures, right? So why does a police officer who holds a weapon and protects lives and does such and such like they do and say, make $40,000 a year? And I think that's what this comes into play, is that it will never change.
Stan, before you jump in, let me get another response from Fahed. So Fahed, what about the people that will say teachers don't get paid what they should, but we don't see teachers doing crazy things with kids? I guess for the most part, I guess that might not even be a true statement, huh? But do you understand what I'm saying? Like teachers have that same type of response. They probably even have even more. They're more responsible. They have a bigger responsibility because they're taking care of our kids for 8 hours out of the day. We're asking them to be counselors and sometimes parents, depending on the community they live in, and all these different things, psychologists, and they make. And I think if you go to Baltimore City, I think teachers there start in the 20s, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you say to teachers? They're in the same predicament.
I think they get different benefits. I mean, I have 2 friends that are teachers, and they have a lot of different benefits and perks that they get through the county and through their system, as well as, hey, their entire summer, they still get paid, right? So they look at, hey, we like this lifestyle, right? You work and you get your summers off. We like to travel, whatever it might be. So even if you're making 30, 40 grand, you're still getting those few months off to kind of either do it on others. I mean, let's just put it this way. When you grow up and you say, hey, I want to be a teacher, I don't think teachers have ever gotten paid fair, right? Or ever gotten paid a lot, right? But you just do it because you want to do it. And you already know it's not going to make you that high dollar. It's more of a, hey, I get the reward and the satisfaction, or you do something when you're on your retirement, right? Somebody has a PhD and they're like, hey, I want to go back in. I want to teach the little ones, right? I think they're different circumstances versus a police officer. I don't think you can really compare apples to apples, because a police officer might encounter a lot of violence, right? Depending on which city you're in or what you're assigned to, right? You might see, a family as, somebody's on heroin, somebody's doing this, somebody's getting shot, somebody's getting, beat. When you encounter these things and you start to embed that in your mind, you will change whether you believe it or not, or you think you are and you're saying you're fine. Because when you go to sleep at night, you can't erase those memories, right? Whereas a teacher, she might erase, the memories of, hey, that kid threw an apple at me, or, I put him in timeout, or I put him to, whatever it might be. I think it's very different when you compare the two. And I think everything is not fair, right? I think teachers should get paid more, but I think it's more of the perks that they get. And I don't know all of them, but they've been doing it for years, and they love it. They're like, we get so many different benefits as being teachers, whether it's shopping, whether it's traveling, whether it's, having the summers off, whether our kids having, like free, I think they get like some kind of scholarship or something. So every community is different. I'm not saying every school system is the same, but they try to give you certain benefits that makes it feel rewarding, and it makes it feel that it's worth it and you're okay. Whereas police officers, other than your pension, or the kind of like holding the cheese over the head that, hey, once you get to this many years, you'll get this. And that's the same with the Army, right? But you don't count on that. Like right now, I just signed 6 years to reenlist, and it's $20,000. But I laugh because I have to complete the 6 years, right? And then I'll get the $20,000 at a tremendous, huge tax rate, and then I'll get maybe 10. And then if I get the 10, I'll get lucky, I'll get it on time, because they have to have funding to pay me out at that time. It's almost like an IOU that you just hope that they have the funding for the to pay me, right? So I already know that it doesn't work. I serve my country because I want to. I feel proud to wear the uniform. I know it's not about the money. But I think if you compare the two, you really can't. That's just my opinion. I think if you talk to a teacher, maybe I'd say 6 out of 10 will tell you it's not about the money.
Sam, what
And they
about
are
you?
happy.
Defining the police. What does that mean to you? And
I'm gonna go on to that, but I want to just touch on what some things that Fahed has said, which
okay,
I kind of look at it in a different lens, because sometimes you got to try to figure out, it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the hen? You know what I'm saying? So, when you're dealing with the police force, they're dealing with the crimes that they're trying to prevent or respond to within that community. Now we got the teachers over here. They can actually they can actually be the prevention of those crimes with the right resources funneled into them, into their schooling, that can prevent further criminal activity from students. And I'm the case in point. When I was in law school, I was a member of I did what is it called, the Juvenile Justice and Special Education Clinic, right? So there, I was responsible for going into the inner city schools and making sure that certain kids were receiving their the right programs and services for the school. I mean, from the school. So if they had any kind of emotional issues or mental health issues, were they getting the services that they were required to get? Now, a lot of the schools that I saw in the beginning of the school year, they're getting all the special education kids in there so they can get them into the school, get the funding from the federal government, and then not providing these kids with their not providing the kids with their services. So what happens is the kid gets frustrated in school. So now the kid's not going to school. I don't want to go to school. Where's the kid? He's in the streets. They call it the school to prison pipeline. And then now they're in with the criminal justice system. Now they have a record. Why do they have a record? Because they were angry or frustrated. So did something in school, which now the school's like, hey, he puts it on him. When actuality is that child's mental health issue or whatever they had, what they were supposed to get certain resources were, now it manifested into something different. Now, instead of addressing the issue at hand, now they're putting them into the criminal justice system. Like, nah, he's a criminal, he's a bad child, he's a bad apple. We'll go ahead, put him in over there, when all he was doing was responding to a system that wasn't providing him with the resources that he needed. And you see it all the time. They turn truancy into criminal. So I'm not going to school because they're not giving me what I need. Now I'm skipping school. Now you're truant. Instead of, dealing with, bringing them back into school or put them in detention, no, they're funneling them and their parents into the criminal justice system. So it's a vicious cycle that a lot of people didn't want to, are not addressing. So, and now it's like, what comes first? Okay, we got the police officers not getting paid over here, but then we got this teachers not getting paid and not getting resourced. So what do we do to fix the problem? I don't think it's, and I'm gonna go to the to defunding the police. When they say defund the police, I don't know what the plan is if you're talking about just taking all funding away from police officers. I don't think that's what the majority of the people say when they say defund the police. But I would have to see an alternative option before I'd be like, hey, yeah, let's just defund the police. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. Not to say it's not a good thing, not to say it's not a bad thing. I just don't have enough information to make an educated decision on that. However, if you're talking about taking some of the funding away from the police, and I'm not talking about the salaries, but I'm just talking about the additional money or funding that's used for equipment or you're militarizing the police, tanks and all this other stuff. If we need tanks to patrol our neighborhoods, then we need to really look at the infrastructure of our communities and figure out what's going on, because somebody dropped the ball somewhere. And if you take that type of money and reinvest it back into the school system, into the teachers, into the programs, I think you kind of fix your problem. But America is more reactionary instead of being proactive. If you're proactive and try to go to the cause and the root of certain things that affect our community, then I believe you have a better option of trying to fix the end goal. But if you're funding your money into the police force and you're not funding your money into the communities, then you're going to continue with this vicious cycle, and you're not going to have I don't think you're going to have I don't think you're going to really affect the criminal aspect or the problem between the communities and the police, because now the police are treating our communities like it's a war zone, or like it's in a combative nature, instead of back in the day when you had people who beat cops that knew the communities, that knew the people in their communities, that walked their beats, and that were were really intertwined within that society, so they can help to police that society in a more efficient and, how shall I say, in a more dignified manner. I think that, I don't know if that answers your question, Leon.
Oh yeah, it does answer my question. We're gonna pause for 1 second, okay?
Okay.
All right. Come on. As y'all can see, we had lost Fahed. He had a prior commitment to go serve his country, our country. And so we definitely appreciate him for being on the pod this morning and give us his thoughts and opinions on reparations and defunding the police. And we definitely appreciate him attending. And so we're going to go ahead and finish up this morning with Stanley. And I think where we left off was you had given your opinion on what you thought defunding the police meant. Gave eloquent statements and reasoning behind your thought process. I guess what we need to have from the masses is a better definition on what they consider defunding the police is. I guess you have two sides to the story, right, Stan? You have one side that thinks that we should just pull the money from the police and that's it, with probably no plan or a partial plan. And then you have another, I guess, three sides. Then you have another side that says we shouldn't defund the police at all. In fact, we should give them more money, maybe increases in salary, increase in training, just an increase in budget overall. And then you have some people in the middle where it's like, I guess we should defund the police without reducing salaries, still give them the training, but then the money that we use for the militarization of the police and the excess of equipment, we could take that money and better utilize that in the community, and maybe from that perspective help quench the violence and the criminality in the communities wherever they may be, and that will make for a better overall community as a whole. Is that what we're getting here, you think?
Yeah, I just want to clear up something. When I say that those who want to defund the police entirely don't have a plan, I'm not. There are people with thought out plans how we should police our own communities. I just don't know what that plan is. You
Gotcha.
know, but you got people that do have a plan in place, and I think they're trying to reference communities like Trenton. I think it was Trenton. Trenton.
It was Camden.
Oh, it's Camden. Camden. That's what it is. Yeah, Camden, New Jersey, and there's another one. Um, I don't know. I think somewhere in the northwest. You know, another city or community out there that kind of had a similar feel. Wasn't completely defunding the police, but it was something that they went to community policing and stuff like that. But once again, I don't know what the plan is. Not to say that I'm against it, and then not to say that they don't have one. I'm just not well versed on the alternative is in those situations.
Yeah, and I think what Camden did is they completely disbanded the police department and then built it back up, and they also have a community board that works in conjunction with the police, and at least in that particular environment, it's worked. I
Yeah.
mean, look back in, I think it was 90 something. I took a job where you would go out and you would sell calculators and handbags. And the guy that took me out that particular day, he was from Camden, and he took me there. And we had to wear suits and in the whole nine, and we're out there trying to sell calculators and handbags. And I'm fortunate enough, man, that I've been to some communities where I've never really been afraid to be around my people. So whether that's over exuberance or just not being fully aware, but I ain't really never been a place where I'm like, man, these are my people, I'm not scared. But I knew about Camden's what the rumors were about Camden, and a lot of that stuff was true back then. Like if you went from there, you really didn't need to be around there. So
that's I feel you. I'm the same way. Like growing up, it was never a neighborhood, especially any city neighborhood that I've been to, that I was scared. I mean, I love being around my people. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of how dangerous or people might deem it dangerous, anything like that. I'm like, the first thing that really scared me was my first day of law school. I'm like, shit. You know what I'm saying?
I got to really buckle down on this. I got to really buckle down.
I know. I haven't really but yeah, I talk to my wife about that all the time. I am so much, I'm so comfortable, I'm so around my community, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
A lot of work and resources that need to be funneled into it. And I need to consider myself at being more effective, in the community.
And that's what we're doing here. I mean, when we're discussing it, we're trying to shed lights on different environments, different conversations, and then coming up with some, a plan of action is actually what we're trying to do here. So, like I said, I think in the first podcast, I donate money to different organizations and stuff like that. And I've done some things when I was in Baltimore, DC area with Big Brothers Big Sisters. But at the end of the day, you can only do so much with money, and we have to come up with some plans and then start locally with the people we know, our kids, the people we know, our friends, and then just branch it out. So if we can do that, man, we'll be well ahead of the game, and we just need more people to do their part. You know what I'm saying? So, but listen, man, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this pod up for today. I really appreciate you joining again. We thank Fahed. We thank Fahed Ahmed for also joining us this morning. Really good conversation. He brought a different aspect from, he's from Indian descent. He's also a veteran of he's still enlisted in the National Guard in Virginia. So he brought his his experiences and his background to the conversation. It was greatly appreciated by the podcast. And got anything else you want to say, Stan?
Nah, that's it. That's it. Thank you for having me on. And I didn't tell Fahed this, but so if you watch the rest of this, thank you for your service. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed the time, and communications that we've had today, man. Very enlightening. So I'm always available whenever you need me. Well, not always, but I'll try to be.
Listen, you've been 2 or 2, man. So we might just invite you every time, man. Come on back whenever you get a chance. and we kind of talked off camera when I paused it earlier, but we're gonna do a couple things, and I think you guys are really gonna like what we got coming up. We're gonna have a special guest on the pod, man. It's gonna be something a little bit different than what we've been doing the last 2 episodes, but I think you'll really enjoy it. Stan and I are gonna work on that, and just stay tuned for that too. I think we're really gonna get a good feedback from that pod that we do later on. So hey Stan, it's 8:30 in the morning, man. Go ahead and spend the rest of the day with your family. Tell the wife and kids I said hello.
Will do. You do the
And
same.
hopefully once this COVID's over with, man, we can get back to the family thing.
Get back to the fellowship, baby.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Have a good one. Everybody, thank you for enjoying the second episode of Informal Conversations. I'm your host, Leon Johnson, and we will see you in another week or two. Have a good one. Peace.